Beyond the Echo Cavern by BreAnna Teschendorf, Chapter 24, Charlie's Calling. In his dream, Charlie found himself once again inside of a white space with no ceiling and no floor. He looked around himself frantically, but he could see nothing, no shapes or forms, just his own feet. At least I can see, he thought to himself. Then the voice spoke to him again, loud and knowing. Charlie, Charlie, what happened? Why can't you see? I, Charlie stammered, feeling nervous and confused. I used the fire dust on a monster who had Annika's leg, and the dust exploded in my eyes. Since then, I can't see. Why don't you trust me, Charlie? The voice asked him softly, with no judgment in the tone. Who are you? Charlie demanded, throwing his hands wide open and spinning in a circle, trying to make out the owner of the voice. The one who called you, Charlie. The one who is, the voice answered him, louder than ever and sounding incredibly close. Without warning, Charlie was blinded by a swirl of bright lights and colors twisting all around him like a swarm of bees. Some of the colors were familiar. Some of them were special ones he had only ever seen in Pertamayan. And some of the colors were new ones that I cannot describe and that Charlie had never seen before. The colors dancing all around him were both overwhelming and inspiring. A kind of excitement filled him and made him breathless, like how you feel just before jumping off something really high into cold water. The voice then spoke again, so close that Charlie could almost feel the warmth of the breath of the speaker, even though he saw no one, nothing except gorgeous color swirl. I will never leave your side, Charlie. I am with you even in your darkness, the voice said, almost in a whisper. How can I know that if I can't see you? Charlie asked. But even as the words were leaving his mouth, his heart told him that it was wrong to doubt the owner of that voice. Those who have sight can see me. Those who trust me will always see I am there. Get up, Charlie, the voice commanded him. Go bathe in the brightest waterfall you find. I will be with you. You must bathe in it alone. With a rush of sound like a mighty wind, the colors left him, and Charlie felt that he was alone. Then he felt something like a pulling and sucking, and he was whisked from the room of light to find that he was still lying on a spongy flower petal. He could hear the waterfalls and hear Annika and Gabe talking not far away from him. Annika, Gabe, he tried to begin, but his jaw was still aching and wouldn't move. He remembered Annika said he should wave his hands, so he sat up and began to wave them dramatically. We are here, Charlie, Annika's voice said, just a minute later, and she shook his hand. What can we do for you? Do you want a drink or to eat something? The flowers are really good. Charlie shook his head. He wondered how he would tell Annika that he wanted to go to the brightest waterfall and dip into it. Then his brain began speaking to him. This is stupid, it told him. That was only a dream. Of course, going into a waterfall won't help. The hopelessness of his situation overwhelmed him with a deep, sickening panic, and he decided that it was worth trying anything and everything to get his sight back, even if it didn't make sense. At least it was a tiny sunbeam of hope. He began making motions with his hands like a waterfall, waving his fingers and making his hands move down. Then he put his head underneath his waving fingers and pointed towards where the sound of the waterfall was coming from. "What is he doing?" Gabe asked. "I think he wants to have a shower in the waterfall," Annika answered incredulously. "Is that it? Do you want to take a shower in the waterfall?" she asked Charlie. He nodded fervently. "Okay, be sure to drink some of the water while you're in there, Charlie. It tastes so great," Gabe said, as they helped him up and began leading him through the rocks to the purple waterfall. They carefully helped Charlie to get under the flow, and he was drenched in the fruity liquid. He even washed his eyes out with it, and it tasted like Charlie had advised him. It was very nice, but when he was finished, he still could not see. He knew it was not the brightest waterfall in the room. If only he could help Annika to understand what he wanted. He began shaking his head back and forth and pointing down the cavern towards the other waterfall. "I don't understand. You don't like this one? You want to go to another one?" she asked him. "Yes, yes," he nodded his head vigorously again. Then, summoning up all his strength, he opened up his mouth the smallest crack. It was agony, but he was able to get out one groaned word. "Yellow!" "Yellow?" Gabe looked around him. "You want to go to a yellow waterfall?" "Yes, there is a yellow one, Charlie, right in the middle. It is the biggest and fastest and very bright. Do you want to go drink from that one? We haven't tasted it yet. It smells like medicine," Annika informed him. Charlie shook his head all the time they were talking, and especially began to nod with vigor when she said the thing about medicine. His heart jumped inside of him. Could it be true then, what he had dreamed? Annika and Gabe led him to the large waterfall. It looked like liquid gold or light spilling from the highest possible point in the room down into the stream. It shined brighter than the other falls and gave most of the light to the cavern. "It looks like it will be difficult to get under it, Charlie," said Annika. "Yeah, it's falling really hard," Gabe added cautiously. Charlie put his hands up for Gabe and Annika to stop and pushed them back a couple of times when they tried to follow him. He knew instinctively that he would have to follow all the instructions of the voice if he was going to be healed. He shook his head no, no at Annika and Gabe and pointed to himself, then to the fall, then to them, and made a stay motion. "You want to go alone?" Gabe asked. Charlie was relieved that they had understood so quickly and nodded his head. Yes, he had to go alone. "Is this about your dream?" Annika asked him, seeing that Charlie had woken up from his dream with a renewed sense of purpose. He nodded. "Okay, Charlie, that waterfall is set back into the wall with large high rocks all around it. The only way to get up to it is to walk up the stream. Are you sure you can do it alone?" Annika asked him. Charlie was not at all sure he could do it alone, and the thought terrified him. However, he knew he had to do it alone, and so he nodded assuredly. "We will sit here and wait for you. If you need us, then wave your arms again, okay?" Annika instructed him. Charlie gave them a thumbs up and proceeded into the water. The going was difficult for him. He kept stumbling over the large jade and turquoise stones that would have excited him if he could have seen them. Now he only banged his knees on them annoyingly. He ran into a particularly squishy, soggy flower, and when he tried to regain his balance on it, his hand slipped off and he crashed into the water. The waterfall was indeed strong, and all its force was pushing against him as he struggled against the current. He kept losing his footing, falling, and being forced backwards. He felt exhausted with the blind struggle, and tears of frustration were in his eyes. But he kept clawing forward, sometimes on his very sore knees, determined to make it. When he was about halfway to the fall, he suddenly slipped on a large flat rock under the water, fell forward, and hit his already hurting chin on another rock that was sticking out of the water. The pain was excruciating. That was when he remembered, for the first time, what he should have always known. The voice had promised him that he was not alone. Could it be true? "Help me!" he cried out, not with his lips, but with all his heart, to the unseen one who had called him, the one who wanted to be with him, who had promised never to leave him. The very moment that the inward cry for help shot out of him, he, he felt something like hands on his arms, a light pressure lifting him up and holding him so that he would no longer fall. Though he continued to stumble, the hands held him steady and kept him upright. He made slow but sure progress forward until at last he was there, standing at the edge of the fall, its mist kissing his face and cool wind swirling out from it. Now that he was standing so close, he could feel its immense power, and he felt afraid to stand under it, as the waters most certainly would crush him. To overcome his fear, he reminded himself what he had been promised, that if he took this one last little step, his blindness would be gone. He summoned his courage for this last move of faith. It was only the smallest step, but it was the only one that was potentially deadly. "I choose to trust you," Charlie whispered to the owner of the voice. He took a deep breath and stepped beneath the violently pounding waters. End of chapter 24. I will see you in chapter 25. God bless you.